having alternative funding mechanisms for scientists, not just those that are in academia, but those that are building companies, is really important. And DeSci is one of the alternatives. Hey, Erum, how are things going?
Things are going well. I'm excited for today's episode of Grow Everything, where we talk about everything around biotechnology and how it's going to transform our economy to be more sustainable, be more exciting and resilient. And I'm excited to talk about all the new and great things that are happening.
I know you were traveling. We have a long weekend in the United States. I stayed in Brooklyn. It's very tame and very quiet, but I'm excited for this transition into the fall. How about you?
Yeah, I've been traveling about up in Canada and really just trying to get some deep thoughts in. I try to have some time to myself, which is impossible when you go to a place where you're meeting tons and tons of family. But I am seeking solace and finally getting around to reading Bossy Pants by Tina Fey, who I admire. Fun fact, Tina Fey went to my high school, or actually went to her high school, Upper Darby High School. So she talks a lot about growing up in that area. So I relate to a lot of what she's talking about. That's really cool to read. But she also talks about her career and her motivations and tips and tricks, all in a very funny way. And I love it. So if anyone has read that and wants to have a micro book club about it, shoot me some messages. I love to talk about Tina Fey and just everything she stands for.
I want to read that too. Okay, so on a more somber note, so we are entering September, and September is Blood Cancer Awareness Month. And I just thought I would mention it because there's something like almost 2 million people live with or are in remission from some kind of blood cancer like leukemia, lymphoma, or myeloma. And these cancers account for something like 10% of all new cancer diagnoses. I'm under the impression that these cancers are very treatable. So just making people aware that this is a month where we think about blood cancer, and maybe we will bring it up again during the course of the month. We are here to talk about the impact of biotech on our lives. And though we don't talk too much about biopharma, that is an interesting area of research.
Yes, yeah. And in our day jobs, which is podcast is not our day job, people. This is our side job. We work with biopharma companies, and there's a lot of great innovation when it comes to treating cancer, from cancer vaccines to CAR T therapy. I'm sure you guys have heard about this, but it's exciting. It's just one of those things that the innovation's there. It's just not evenly distributed yet. So I think it's looking good for cancer therapy. So it's great that they have a month dedicated to blood cancers, and let us pay attention and see what we can do to help this movement.
Yeah. And you had written something also in our show notes about the brain washing itself at night. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah. So I came across this piece of news in one of my WhatsApp chats, because I have lots of them with different biotech communities. And someone shared this article in Scientific American, which I'll put in the show notes, but it talks about how during non-REM sleep, scientists have been looking at EEG waves, and they noticed that not only do they help consolidate memories, which many of us might know about, but they also propel cerebrospinal fluid through the brain, flushing out waste much more effectively than when you're awake. So when you're sleeping, you're actually having a detox of your brain, and it's good for you. You need to clean out your brain. So it's important to have sleep, because if you don't get good sleep, it also leads to dementia. There's signs of some correlation there, which, again, you have to read the article. It's good for people that are looking at sleep. I think there's been more and more stories in the mainstream about the importance of sleep. People are buying the Oura rings. I have one, are noticing how important it is, and not to just, I just need to stay awake all the time because I have so much work to do. Sleep's important. And also, Tina Fey mentions the importance of sleep in Bossy Pants.
So it's super interesting that you mentioned this, because this weekend I went down the rabbit hole on sulforaphane. Have you heard about that?
No, what's that?
This is related more to some of the biohacker stuff that we've talked about. Sulforaphane, it turns out, is a sulfur-rich compound that's found in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli sprouts. And it turns out that it offers neuroprotective and cognitive benefits. So people take it because the studies are showing that it helps improve the immune system in your brain. And so I've been going down the rabbit hole. I just watched a Dr. Rhonda Patrick video where she talked about the 5 supplements she would recommend for the elderly, not that I'm elderly. And so it's one that I hadn't really looked at before. The other things she mentioned, which we know, are things taking a multivitamin, taking the coenzyme Q precursors, taking creatine, if that's something you're interested in. But this sulforaphane sulforaphane is not one that I'd really looked at before. And so when I started going down the rabbit hole, I was like, oh, this is something I want to add to the stack.
Yes. I mean, there's been so much research on different nutraceuticals and supplements that are super effective in all sorts of ways. And it's interesting because I participated in this panel discussion, and one of the points that the panelists mentioned was that there are unique molecules that are naturally found in foods, but just not in accessible quantities. You would have to eat 10 pounds of broccoli or 10 pounds of blueberries in order to get the efficacy that you need to help. So these supplements are very interesting, especially if they can be produced in a way that is bioavailable and not just made through brute force chemistry, and maybe it could be less effective. So I'm very excited to see more research in the space. A lot of people are working towards it. We know people in different companies. One person that comes to mind is Michael Heltzen of Exozymes. On his episode, was talking about a molecule that was found in hemp, but in order to access it, you would have to eat a lot of quantities, so they're able to produce it. Very interesting to see that there are a lot of companies that are being created around these molecules that help us in all sorts of ways. So stay tuned, watch this space, listen to this space for more nutraceutical development news.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we're going to do, since given this is a holiday week, we're going to do something a little bit different, which we also think is something special. Instead of one conversation, what we're going to do is have you listen to a collection of voices that are shaping the future of decentralized science. We thought we'd start off by having these people who we already interviewed, give us their definitions of DeSci to help people better understand this. Erum, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, DeSci week, DeSci couple weeks, because it's a deep topic. There's a lot of different technologies that converge in order to make DeSci happen, but we don't want to necessarily talk about the technology because people get lost in the sauce, right? So they want to be able to talk about the outcomes. Why is DeSci so important? And there is a lot of value in DeSci to democratize science, make it more accessible, make it more fair, I would say, take it out of the institutions into people's hands. And you'll hear from our previous guests that all talk about decentralized science in different ways and how they organize around decentralized science. And there's an organization framework called Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, or DAOs. So you'll hear people from these DAOs. So people that we've interviewed, for example, you'll hear from Laura Minquinin of Athena DAO, which focuses on women's health. And I recently went to one of their webinars, and wow, the companies that they put money behind are doing incredible things and unlocking and unveiling unique biochemical pathways that women experience just because of they're different. And we all know that a lot of the healthcare interventions and science that has come about has been focused on looking at men over women over the years. And there's good reasons and bad reasons for that. But anyway, I'll stop there. We also have Albert Annis of ValleyDAO, and they look at synthetic biology applications. And I saw Albert, he did a LinkedIn post about the resilience of having DAOs over venture-backed companies, which is very interesting. And then Jocelyn Pearl, who we love, has been looking at biohacking. She's a doctor who also has worked in biotech. One of the first people we spoke with about DeSci. So Jocelyn's been involved in different DAOs and decentralized movements, so you'll hear from her. And finally, our friend Michael Fisher of Stadium Science, but also the founder of DeSci NYC, one of the places that I first learned about the value of decentralized science. He sings a song of the importance of democratizing science, and DeSci is a mechanism in which that is enabled. But tell us, Karl, why is DeSci important?
Look, we're living in very interesting times, and government funding, particularly in the scientists in the United States, seems to be very much in question. Funding gets taken away, lawsuits happen, then funding is reinstated. And so I think there's a big question as to whether scientists are going to continue to receive the kinds of funding that they had previously received from the US government. And that really puts, I hate to say it, it really puts our future at peril, because basic research is the economic driver. And you can just see that by the amount of GDP that China is investing in basic research and science. So having alternative funding mechanisms for scientists, not just those that are in academia, but those that are building companies, is really important. And DeSci is one of the alternatives. And I'm really excited to see the way that DeSci evolves and makes an impact in science. One group that we haven't had on here yet is Hair DAO, and we want to get them on the podcast because they've basically developed a really good model where they're taking old compounds that are already FDA approved for certain indications and testing them to grow hair, which is a gigantic market. They've been very successful at this, and we'd love to give them on to talk about this. And next week, what we're going to do is we're going to continue this conversation with Benji Leibowitz of Molecule DAO and also Pump Science. And he's busy reimagining how decentralized communities can accelerate biotech innovation even further. So with that, let's let our guests take it away and tell us what the definition is of decentralized science. And first, we'll start with our friend Michael Fisher of Stadium Science and also the organizer of DeSci NYC.
DeSci stands for decentralized science, which is how could you improve science using the blockchain? So there's DeFi, obviously, which many people have heard of, which is decentralized finance, which is how can you use the blockchain to improve finance? And there the concept is, okay, we have all these different tokens and we're going to swap them with each other and we're going to exchange value. But that value is a little bit amorphous. What is the value attached to Ethereum? What is the value attached to Bitcoin? Those have value, but what is the value attached to some of these longer tail projects? And what DeSci is saying, what if each token was attached to a research project? And what if anyone who participated in a research project was allowed to earn tokens based on their contributions? So if you produce really good data, if you produce really good analysis of a data set, if you're really great at bringing people on board, you're incentivized through tokens to do great work. Then the value of that project, so let's say hypothetically you wanted to study sleep. Everyone that participates in a sleep study would earn tokens based on the data that they contribute. People would be able to do analysis on it and they would earn tokens. People would be able to recruit people and they would earn tokens. And people would be able to publish that work and earn tokens. And then at the end of this, they'd have this valuable research project that they'd created, and everyone would own a certain percentage of it, commensurate with how much work they've put into it. So it's like a very different way of thinking about science, because in traditional science, you have your PI and you do research within a lab, and maybe you have a couple grad students, and it's sort of locked in the walls. And no one can really contribute on the outside. There's no open interfaces to allow people to get involved. But DeSci is about opening up science. It's about bringing more people into the scientific community. It's about growing the community. So right now, there might be X number of scientists in the world, but I think there could be 1,000 times more with DeSci because you're opening it up to more people that might be interested in science who are just outside of the traditional realm of science. Science, just in general, the way it's funded, it doesn't use the VC model. You're not trying to really find 1000x things. But the way science works today is you pay taxes. The taxes go to the NIH or the National Science Foundation or DARPA or something like that. And then actual people, make decisions based on what they know. So they're like, I grew up studying this. I'm going to fund that sort of thing because that's what I know. The problem with that is it works well for like traditional science. You have the things that always get funded, but it doesn't allow for like really crazy ideas or out there ideas that should be funded, even though they might not be mainstream yet. The problem is that the bottleneck is with these funders who have a lot of control over the direction that research takes. When you open source it or when you crowdsource it, you have many, many more eyes looking at this. So you might have something on ultrasound that looks really promising, but it's still a little bit far out there and it requires a little bit of nurturing before the science will become into a full-fledged therapeutic. Crowdsourcing this allows for more people to get involved and for them to also be rewarded based on the work that they contribute to the project. With taxes, you don't do any work. You get taxed and then it goes to the government and then it goes to something else. This is a much different model. This model of funding science is about people actively contributing work to a DAO or to a research project, whether it be through advice or whether it be through data or whether it be through onboarding more users. It's much more interactive and it's much more diverse in terms of the types of things that are allowed to be funded using this new decentralized science model.
Next up, we have Albert Annis of ValleyDAO.
So let me get into a little bit on the definition of what a DAO is. In its most simplest form, and the way that I like to define it, it's a group of people with a shared vision towards a shared goal. and they have a shared bank account. During the inception of this organization, people can contribute funds, and in return, they receive a digital receipt, also called tokens. And these tokens give every individual a governance right on how that treasury is used. So the majority of DAOs are structured like this. There are some DAOs that are structured quite differently, but conventionally speaking, this is what you will see 99% of the time. So back in around mid-2022, we had our token auction. So people could contribute funds. And during that time, back when I was starting it, I found a bunch of Discord servers. Discord is like the home of Web3 and blockchain and everything. And I found my way to decentralized science, which is kind of like an offspring of the open science movement, but more looking at how to use the blockchain for the funding and the dissemination of science to make science more open, more transparent, more fair, new incentives and ways for researchers to get their research funded, but also new ways for being recognized. Like right now, you're not really recognized for doing a peer review. You don't get anything out of it other than you have to do it. But what if there was a system that gave people something in return for providing that really valuable knowledge? So I found my way to decentralized science, and there was these different Discord groups, and I just put together a message and like, hey, who wants to do this thing? Who is into synthetic biology? I'm super excited about this. Here's my thoughts. I started spamming it in different Discord channels, and then we were on a call. I think it was a call of like 10, 15 different people. I didn't know anybody on that call. And then we started discussing like, oh yeah, this is how it could be structured. This is how we could structure the foundational documents. And oh, let's create a website. So it was quite a playful process of how this thing was created. I was working full-time at a different job back then, so I didn't know that it was actually going to form and crystallize into what it is today. So started building that initial community. More people started like being drawn towards it. A lot of people were curious and like, what is this thing? People have never heard about blockchain before. But eventually we formed a core group. We formed our community that works in different, we call them growth groups. So different focus areas of the DAO.
Hi, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
Now let's listen to Dr. Jocelyn Pearl give her thoughts around DeSci and DAOs.
So decentralized science, or DeSci, the name was borrowed from a movement that had started a little bit prior to that of decentralized finance, which came out of blockchain technology, essentially. And I hope I don't turn a million people off to this idea by saying that, but some of the themes of DeFi, or decentralized finance, was that the idea that anyone could become their own banker. Essentially, anyone could own their own assets, be in control of their finances, whereas the canonical system of finance, we had these centralized banks and you relied on them to hold your assets and control these assets and protect your assets. In decentralized science, some of the themes that were borrowed and some of the concepts are essentially that science could be done anywhere, that anybody could participate in science, that it's very collaborative, also that we could utilize blockchain technology to track what's happening on the science side, to finance what's happening happening in science. So those are some of the themes. I started following the space mainly because I was interested in scientific publishing, which is this other sector that's controlled by a few major players. They make a ton of money off the backs of scientists and researchers publishing their articles. And these researchers pay to publish their articles. And then the consumer, the people trying to read the articles, often have to pay to then read these articles. So it's this weird triple pay system that is just ripe for disruption. And there were a lot of people in this DeSci sector talking about this and trying to come up with new ways of getting scientific knowledge out there, financing it, and that kind of things. That's kind of what drew me in. And I started mapping out some of the groups working in this space and writing about some of these ideas and really exploring what was happening at this intersection of blockchain and science. I think it's going to take a lot of activism and people creating new platforms for this type of research. And it's a very hard thing to get off the ground. But I'm hopeful that there'll be some builders in this space and someone will be able to break the mold. But there are several groups out there. And I have some of these tracked in this DeSci wiki and this DeSci landscape that I put together. You know, a lot of biotech industry happens in what I call the black box of biotech, and behind closed doors. A lot of the development, it's word of mouth, it's your network, it's learning which CROs people trust. Even on the very basic side of purchasing lab materials, there's no Amazon for scientists in the sense that you can go on Fisher Sci and see like the customer rating of a product and the reviews. So those were some of the concepts we started talking about, and that was how LabDAO was formed, with the idea of, can we break out some of this knowledge and share it with more people so that anybody from anywhere could do this type of science. And so the LabDAO is a decentralized platform for scientists. We're essentially building in this online lab, and the group is building tools for scientists.
And finally, Laura Minquinin of Athena DAO.
So decentralized science is a new vertical in the Web3 crypto world that takes inspiration from decentralized finance. Decentralized finance was the notion that you could bank the unbanked, as well as some things with privacy concerns, people having self-ownership and being custodial about their assets. There's a long history of that already in the past decade. And I think people, when they see in the mainstream crypto or Web3, they think what the newspapers show them sometimes, or TV shows, that it's only scammers. And obviously what's promoted sometimes that it's people trying to launder money and all of these things. No, a lot of it had to do with even getting people that don't have bank accounts a way to transact. The other part is people that want to make sure that they have an opportunity in a new asset class, which now in the US is very restricted. So making money for society has become much harder. And crypto was a way to try to change the dynamic. So decentralized science is trying to tackle the problems of science. And there are various verticals. We work on the funding part. We're biotech DAO, bioDAO, which is trying to fund areas of research that are overlooked. But there's other verticals and problems in science. Publishing is a huge thing. Reproducibility is a huge thing. And publishing, for instance, people need to understand that scientists have to spend a lot of money to get published. If their paper makes it, it's still $5,000, $10,000. The people that review the papers don't get anything. And the publishing house still charges you to be able to read the papers. So $1 billion industry that is pretty much financed by taxpayers' money, because the researchers are getting their labs paid by government money or like institutional money, is then restricted for everyday layperson to read. Funding is a huge thing for some areas of science. And the biotech DAOs, a decentralized autonomous organization, it's a formation of people that come together, different stakeholders, to try to bring a mission forward. The organization is supposed to be less hierarchical and more flat, in which different working groups have different operations, and people try to come together from different aspects to actually move a mission forward. Athena DAO, it's one of those organizations, and our vertical in the decentralized science space is funding, and specifically funding for women's health research. When we came together, it was 2 entrepreneurs and 2 scientists, and then a bunch of other people that were interested in women's health. I guess the formation is pretty much putting a mandate, deciding how to do it, organizing the working groups, trying to go recruit. We have a token, which is one of the things that it's interesting in this space because it creates new incentives. And the incentives are supposed to help people be onboarded to your mission. So everybody in the DAO that wasn't getting paid right away, anything, they were quote unquote accumulating tokens or working groups. A lot of people are still rewarded by those. The token has an intrinsic value because of an auction that happened. It's almost like crowdfunding, but on the blockchain. And why I think it's a very interesting connotation is because women, when they understand that the reason they go to a doctor and the doctor says to them, it's just your hormones, you're just a woman, don't worry, you can take pain. It's because they don't know why those things are happening to women. And why don't they know? Because we haven't researched it. So imagine a woman saying, instead of buying $100 of a supplement that is just a supplement, what if I buy $100 with ATH, or Athena DAO has a product that most of the proceeds go actually to funding science? Making that connection, I think, is going to be very powerful as we grow and we really try to get to women themselves.
We did it. Wow. I cannot believe we had all those people that are advocating for DeSci and DAOs. I mean, it's really, to us, a new way of doing science and making it more accessible to people. But any thoughts, Karl, on your side about DeSci?
Look, I think this is evolving so quickly, and I think it's really important to understand it, because at the same time that you've got decentralized finance evolving and becoming actually very important, decentralized science is also evolving and I think going to become also very important. I remember early on having a conversation with Ari Libman of Mars VC and also Biosphere, and we were talking about having a cloud lab that was funded by DeSci, and having that cloud lab would enable scientists from around the world to basically make their work available to a lot of people. And that to me was a fascinating idea. I haven't seen how that has evolved, but I think we're going to see that thing become reality very quickly. Erum, what did you think?
I loved it. I mean, I love it. And now our audience, now you, our listener, you're primed to be a decentralized science advocate. So get ready for our next episode where we speak with Benji Leibowitz of Molecule DAO and Pump.Science. That is an incredible episode because we recorded it before and your mind's going to be blown away. You do not want to miss this paradigm shifting conversation. So stay tuned and thank you so much for listening to the Grow Everything podcast.